Good morning, everybody, and this is a Monday morning on January the 16th, and according to the TV, it's a blue Monday. Well, I guess a lot depends on one's attitude as we look out at the weather and look around us. Maybe it's not a blue Monday for most of us. Maybe it's not. Maybe at least it's not for me. It's a wonderful morning and just glad to be here. Now, what I'm going to do is pick up on some remarks I made earlier about the education or the lack thereof of a lot of Christian people. In other words, I made the statement that for a lot of Christian people, the biggest problem is not growing up. Now, what that means, of course, is that they grow up in physically they grow up as far as educating themselves with the skills they need for their career or their job, what have you. So there's a great deal of maturity, except in religion. That's where the difference is. So it seems to be that somewhere along the line, as Christians grow up, the one part of their life that doesn't grow up seems to be their religion. What they think, what they believe about their religion. And this is particularly significant by the very fact that a lot of people, when it comes to explaining what they believe or why they believe it, simply don't have an answer. Now, this seems kind of strange, to be honest with you, because a lot of our Catholic kids spend 12 years in a Catholic school and yet don't seem to have much in the way of really mature faith system that carries them through the difficulties in their life. There seems to be a plateauing, if you will, at a certain age. And that plateauing then becomes part of the whole problem, if you will, along with other problems, of course. I'm not in any sense blaming anybody. I'm just saying the way I see it, which may be totally wrong, probably is. You'll have to forgive me for that one, because all I want you to do is think about it yourself. Don't worry about what I'm saying, but be more concerned about what you say, what you think, and how that affects your lifestyle. So like I say, that thing of growing up as far as our worldview from our faith perspective, worldview. Is it really a worldview of an adult or not? It may be an adult worldview in some areas, not so much in other areas. But somehow I think for us to see that what's really important is to grow up, mature in our faith. I guess that's as simple as I can put it. To grow up in our faith and what we believe or don't believe and what's going on in our life, which displays our efforts or lack thereof. We know that the church for a long time, of course, generally the only educated people in the village or the town were the clergy and the doctors. That's about it. The vast majority of people simply didn't have the wherewithal to get an education. And so there grew up a great dependency on the clergy. If somebody wanted to know something about what they might believe, then of course the reference was, well, go and talk to the clergy. They're educated. And in a sense, there was some education for the clergy. Sometimes there wasn't very much, but there was that whole dynamic. The clergy knows, and the people don't. The clergy knows, and he tells the people, and the people are very passive. What did the clergyman say? What did he say? What did he teach? And if I don't remember, well, go and ask him. So it was that dependency on the clergy. And as a matter of fact, the clergy then found themselves between a rock and a hard pile, because they ended up then having that dependency on them. They were sort of a middleman between God and people. And the feeling was that the clergyman, because he followed the rules of his particular church, he could either give God to people through the sacraments, if you will, or he could deny people God. For example, a couple who didn't attend church regularly could come with a newborn baby and ask for baptism, and because they hadn't been attending church, then the pastor could very easily say, no, won't do it, won't do it. The same with marriages, funerals. And they always had that sense of the clergy has the power to either give you God or not give you God. So here's a situation then that we're in, and it made people, say, very dependent on the clergy. And it often also made lay people very resentful of the clergy. A lot of resentment. A lot of times in history, there's been a lot of anger, anti-clericalism, because the priests sort of were seen more as rulers, if you will, than shepherds of souls, shepherds of people. However, times are changing radically. They are. Number one is, most of people today are well educated. Not just that they've gone to college or university, but they have traveled. The TV brings the world right into our homes. There is the internet. So in a real sense, there's never been a time in history when information was so available. Now, you can judge whether that information is available, is helpful or not, but that's another story. But we are living in a time of the educated lay people. And as a result, they don't play the game of Father knows best. They just don't play that game. They won't play the game of Father knows best. People are doing critical thinking. They're saying, well, wait a minute. You know, I've thought this through pretty good myself. My life experience, my own wisdom, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with it. That's what a lot of people are saying. That the traditional story no longer grabs people. Traditional story no longer speaks for the times in which we are living. Because now we're not living in a local village. We're living in a global village. Oh man, that's a whole different story. Living in the global village. And we are connected. We are now realize how connected we are to people around the world, not just in our local community or in our local country. That we are connected to all the people of the world and all the great thinking of the world, from Australia to Japan to Korea to Europe, the Americas. All of that information is just flowing across, and it's all there available. So in many ways then, our thinking is expanding immensely. We see a much bigger picture today than they saw in the past. And it's being able to pay attention to that picture, and what is it teaching us? What's it telling us about who we are and what we're here for? And so, like I say, the traditional story, unfortunately, or fortunately, is no longer viable in the 21st century. Not that it's all wrong, of course not. But for the most part, it doesn't connect. It simply doesn't connect. And so what we're looking at here today now is something quite different. We're looking at a story which begins, which brings together science and what science tells us, and what a new interpretation of Scripture and the world in which we live, what this tells us. So it's a completely new story. And I think it's a beautiful story. I think it's a powerful story. And I think it really does help us to live as a species, as human species here on Earth. I was thinking of how we understand science. And that's so important for us. You know, the Big Bang is a fact. Scientists tell us it's a fact. And at that point, spirit and matter became one. And it's been that way ever since. That the very spirit of the living God dwells within all of creation. And as Sally McFay wrote, all of creation is the body of God. All creation is the body of God. So this means that you and I are a part of the body of God. And we're already looking at science that says that evolution began 13, 14 billion years ago and has been evolving ever since, even to today. And part of that evolution is to see ourselves as the body of God. And the body of God is all of creation. So just as your hand is a part of your body, so each one of us is a part of the body of God. Body of God. We arise from within the body, we live in the body, and we die into the body. And that's kind of the way we understand it today. And I think the de-emphasized today, because of science and a new interpretation of Scripture, not literal, but metaphorical, we're able to see then that we live in this world as a part of God. And as I've been teaching for years, we are God become human. And so long we believed in a distant God, a sky God as I called it, who lives somewhere up there in the sky and might intervene once in a while, just might. If you said enough prayers, or if you were devout enough, then you could call on God to intervene. Well, today we look at God, use that word God, it's more of a sense of a noun and a verb. A noun and a verb. And I think it's the verb part that really fascinates me and catches me, is that God is a verb. Therefore, God is always acting in all of creation. God is always acting in my life. And for me to become conscious of this, it's a raising of consciousness. And that's what evolving today in the human species is. The human species is being raised in their consciousness. And being raised in our consciousness, we can see things that we could never have seen before. It was always there, but we couldn't see it. Now we are seeing it. And it's how we are a part of that seeing and how it's impacting our life, how it's energizing us. Energizing us with, first of all, which gives us a much wider view, a lot wider view of life, of creation and our place in it. So it's all becoming so much more than it was. And so I have to think that if we really look at it carefully, we can see how, willingly or not, we are being transformed by the times in which we live. We simply are. And that's one of the beauties of it. So it's that sense of awakening, of seeing, and that's fantastic. But also to help ourselves along the way, if we're